Great.
Hey.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Hi, hi, Zuki. Hi, Wiebke.
Hey.
Great. I think we can begin our session. I'm very excited to have you today. We're going to be talking about rebooting your career. In the sort of in the time of COVID, in the time of lockdowns, I think it's important to have a conversation about what this is meaning for people and their careers throughout the world, not just Africa. So maybe by way of introduction, I'll introduce myself, and then I'd really like you to introduce yourself, Zuki. And Wiebke, since we'll be talking about careers, I think it's important that you give us a little bit of a taste of what you do and what you've been doing. So my name is Jabulile Mpanza, and I'll be moderating the session today. I'm an economist by training, and so currently working in the strategy space and did a bit of consulting before, and also pursuing my PhD studies. So looking forward to having a conversation about the ways in which we've pivoted in our lives and what our careers are doing at the moment. Zuki, can you kick us off with a brief intro?
Yeah, hi everyone. So awesome to be part of the campus party. And I love the name. I think I'm an eternal student of life itself. And I think if you have no idea what it is to pivot, you're hardly going to survive this new era. And I am a rule breaker, a change maker, and I love how we have the opportunity to almost press the reset button on life, on work, on societal structures, belief systems. We get to redo life. And that's what my life has been about. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in the education space, and I'm rethinking and reimagining how we skill ourselves, our mindset, the human being, for this new era, what I call the new era. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Zuki. So basically, you're a rule breaker, you're a rebel, is what I'm hearing, essentially.
With a cause.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Party in my house, yeah.
Yay.
I'm a computer scientist. At the moment, I'm doing a full-time PhD. But I've been several things in my life. So before doing or getting into computer science, I worked as a data scientist for 4 years, and I'm still teaching data science now, online teaching. And before that, I worked as a mechanical engineer. So the thing that has been driving my career choices, though, is ultimately still the fundamental belief that I'll call it our elementary technologies. So water, electricity, road infrastructure, manufacturing. That's what drives development in countries, and especially in countries like South Africa and across Africa. So that's the area in which I want to have impact. But the world is changing, so how that infrastructure works to have impact is going to change too. And so the domain that I've been working in throughout my career has been the energy space. So as much as I've moved from mechanical engineering to data science to computer science, I worked in energy efficiency, then in household energy consumption, and now I'm working on artificial intelligence for smart grids. So effectively, there is a trend throughout, and pivoting your career is necessary, but it doesn't mean that you have to go from doing A on the one side to doing like B on the. That is a complete counter opposite.
So, Wiebke, what have you not done in the sciences? I'm in like.
No, man. The older you get, the more you realize how little you knew about anything when you made your career choices. So now, like, biology is becoming so fascinating, and I think I stopped doing biology in grade 9, but there are all these electrical circuits in tiny little animals, and I'm like, wow, they've got nervous systems that can do electrical circuits way better than sensors can. So I'm like, I want to learn about amoebas. So geography, there's so much cool stuff in the sciences, but I think that's the always learning component. Is that
actually, sort of segueing from what you're talking about, because it actually brings me to the first thing I want us to talk about, is this idea of what do you want to be when you grow up? I think a lot of people watching today have been asked that question or are getting asked that question continuously. You know, what are you going to be? What are you doing? What are you doing on the campus? I know people change their degrees 4 times in their first year of university because they had this idea of, I wanted to be this when I grew up. So maybe, Zuki, if you can just talk to that. Do you think this is still relevant today? Is the idea static or is it ancient, as it were?
Never ancient. I mean, that's the thing about universal truths, is that we're all kind of born. And if you think of a piece of software that a computer comes preloaded with, we have that innate desire to bring some kind of value to life, right? And then as we grow up, that framing and that understanding kind of becomes narrower and narrower as society imposes views on us and kind of redirects us. But I think innately we're all born with a desire, and it is our life's work to shape that. I think what's very sad is that we ask kids when they're really young, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And we think cute, right? And I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a police officer. And we think, oh, cute. And then we let them go through school. And then, you get to university level and then nobody's asking you what you want to be anymore. They're telling you that, hey, listen, you're going to go into that career because your chances of making money are greater. So we kind of go through a process of killing that innate desire. What I'm excited about, and the reason why I believe the child's dream is still relevant, is that for me it's less about what it is you dream about, because when you're young you have no concept of the world yet, but what is relevant is that fire to bring value. And what this new era is about is that we have to rethink new products, new services, new businesses, new industries. I mean, I'm listening to Wiebke, she's excited about amoebas. I'm like, right. But the point is, there's room in the world for every single child desire to be shaped into something of commercial value, something of human impact, because this is the era of reimagining. So I wish school didn't do this to us. Right. We have to kind of design schools that allow that internal flame to keep burning, and then we give it shape as we contextualize it in the world around us by way of impact and new type of career design. So the answer is yes, allow that childhood dream to flourish.
And very similarly, Wiebke, I mean, having been in the sciences and knowing, in South Africa that we have almost a gap in that, there's not enough kids doing sciences and the STEM sort of thinking. What would you say around that, in the sense that what do they want to be when they grow up, and how did you sort of navigate that difficult space?
I'll approach the response to two. I first want to build a bit on what Zuki was saying, because I think she expressed something really great. So when I hit the end of my 20s, and the end of your 20s, if you've been there, like from 28 to 30, it's like not a great time in life usually, because you've got all these thoughts and you're wondering and you're going into the new decade and you think about what you've done.
I suddenly feel so normal. Thank you.
And what really hit me was this difference between thinking about what you want to be versus who you want to be. And what I concluded at the end of my 20s is using your 20s to think about, to really understand who you are, and then knowing that for the rest of your life you can still do what you want to do. In many ways, it's much better than spending your 20s stressing about what you want to do, then hitting your 30s realizing you have no clue who the hell you are, revamping who you are, and then coming back to the first question of figuring out what you do. And I think that speaks to what Zuki was saying about this, where's the fire? And I think that fire is the who are you. So if you don't know what you want to do, then the one question better to think about right now is to think about who you are. So answer who you are, and then the what will come later. And then in terms of like my personal journey, I always had the belief that the thing that I want to be hasn't yet been invented. So when I studied mechanical engineering, I was like, when I studied mechanical engineering, I was always, okay, this thing is quite cool, but I really don't. I mean, I can get good marks, but I don't care about cars and engines and all these mechanical things. Like, it's interesting, but like that, like I knew that that's not where my fire is. So I always felt it was going to lead me to the next thing. And so when I started working in mechanical engineering, I worked in a piping section. So I had to calculate how long and how thick pipes need to be. And I was like, is this what my life is coming to? I'm going to calculate the length of the pipes. And then when I got into data science, I realized data science is all about building pipelines. It's just pipelines for like taking data, and I was like, no, I'm back in piping again. This thing isn't leaving me. And what I found an interesting question in is saying that if I had this perspective that what I'm going to do hasn't yet been invented, at some point though, you also need to stop and say, okay, well, I'm going to build depth in something. So now I've come much more to something and saying, okay, cool. So the thing that I'm going to do hasn't been invented. When am I going to stop and invent it then? So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's important. And I love the thematic area that you bring up about the who you are question, because very few people ask themselves that later in life. And as a generation of people who think about their feelings and sort of self-discover from that, what are your thoughts about that question for yourself? What is the tools that you used to figure that out, the who you are aspect?
My goodness. I wish I could do my 20s and my 30s over again, right? And have that question answered right at the beginning, because now I'm bearing a lot of scars, hitting against walls, being in spaces and places with people that I had no business being in. So the who am I question has been the work of my life. And I almost remember that, that seminal moment when you make the decision to start answering or start discovering the answer to that question. And, the kind of tools that I use, and it's not a single tool, right? Because it's a journey of self-discovery and self-mastery. And sometimes it takes you into workplaces, it takes you into friendship circles that are right and wrong for you. And you have to develop almost that internal compass, to be able to navigate with, to tell you that this space is wrong for me, this person is wrong for me, this job is wrong for me, or it is right for me. So for me, it really has been a journey of trial and error, and I'm bearing the scars proudly now. The greatest outfit I wear now is my scars of self-discovery. But as a way of gifting that to the world, I've made that a part of my work. So I have a campus or an academy called Innovator Gap Year Academy, and it is the structured, safe vehicle for young people to incubate for 6 months and spend time deep diving to answer that question first before they launch a career. Like Wiebke so eloquently said, what if what I want to do has not been invented yet? But you kind of have to go back to the starting point, to the birthplace of that thing, and that's you, your essence, who you are. And it's like I said earlier, and I'm very passionate about this, school kills that. So, so what we do at IGY Academy is kind of unlearn and strip the narratives that society has laden on you to give you a label and an answer to that question. Spend time unlearning and stripping away those narratives, and what we find is that what's left is the truth, and the truth is you. And sometimes it scares you, and sometimes it ignites something kind of like that force to go forward with. So my journey has led me to creating a safe environment for people to do that, so that they don't have to spend 40 years discovering it like I had to.
Right. So, Zuki, your tool has been to find it for yourself and help others sort of navigate towards determining what it might be for themselves, which is great because you're going to help a lot of people in the process, right?
Yeah. We find if you think about it now, when I think of young people and I describe kind of post-school young people, they are faced with this dilemma that they have invested 12 years in schooling already, where we promise them that if you complete that journey successfully, there's a nice bouquet of careers waiting for you. And now these poor kids kind of get to the end of that path and they're like, where are these careers? They're literally being dismantled and dissipating. So they're kind of caught in that gap where they have to pick or design careers that haven't been invented yet, or develop skills that were not previously valued, that are now suddenly becoming so valuable. So in that gap, I think is the opportunity to transition people by doing things differently. And that's what our academy seeks to do.
Yes, similarly, Wiebke, with you doing your PhD, I'm sure you're finding that sort of things like data science have become these big career and big moves that people speak about.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in understanding what's been in your toolbox and what have you learned through the journey, especially moving from a professional sector, as we call it, to academia, essentially. What's been your experience and tools?
Sure. So I think similar to Zuki, also it's been this thing of trying and experimenting. I read a great book like some years back, and the motto, kind of my takeaway from that book, was there are 3 things you need to do in life to be successful. Only 3 things, and that's quite easy. The first thing is try new things. The second one is learn from your mistakes, and the third one is don't die. So if you do those 3 things over and over and over again, you'll eventually hit a path that works. And so what I like is actually that's how some of the like successful machine learning or reinforcement learning algorithms work. So kind of how the way we're designing AI is also to say you go and you need to first you search. Once you then find something, you exploit. So it's like this constant like moving between exploration where you go look for new things and then exploitation when you find something that works. But if you keep but at some point then you might not be in the best possible space. You need to go out and explore again. So so it's this continuous like cycle, I guess. And like some of what I found really interesting, and I think it's worth to remember, there's a tension in life, I think, or maybe tension isn't the right word. Maybe it's more a harmony and a unison between being and doing. And the being is kind of the reflective part, the part where you think about who you are, who you want to be, what you want to do. But until you go out and do it, nothing ever happens. So the real learning happens by you taking your feet and going onto the streets and doing something. So if you're thinking about entrepreneurship, bake some muffins, take them onto the street and try sell them. And then you learn whether it's easy or whether it's hard. And so kind of it's, and then on the other hand, if you keep doing the same thing and you never stop to think about what worked and what didn't work, you can't actually ever improve on it. So I think that's really important to keep in mind of saying, when are you being, when are you doing, how do you migrate between the two and how do you learn? And then like a personal passion of mine, and I think it's like, if there's one thing we need to do more of in South Africa is you need to find somebody whom you can mentor. So no matter where you are in your life, you'll have learned some things that other people haven't learned. And so much learning happens in the process of you teaching somebody else, because you suddenly realize, okay, I'm 23 and I thought I didn't have a clue about my career, but there's an 18-year-old who knows nothing about university or career choices. And so like, if you're not sure about what to do to advance your career, go find somebody else and help them with who's younger and help them with theirs. So mentorship is really an amazing way of bringing the being and the doing together.
I mean, I appreciate that, because very often people are told to go find mentors, not to be them. So I think that's an important message to sort of the campus community, is that you have something to offer out there. Let's talk about the situation today, right? It's COVID-19. We are under a lockdown version. I don't even know what version you're on anymore. 3.5?
3.5.
3.5. And part of, putting this topic together was thinking, what has this time said to us, in rebooting our careers, thinking about Africa 2.0 and how the continent in itself and the country comes out of this space. So I'm interested to understand and to hear from you, what's the lockdown particularly, because I think COVID-19 is going to be a virus that we live with, whether there's a treatment or a vaccine or there's herd immunity, whatever the sort of next feature might look like. But these lockdowns will eventually come to an end. So I'm interested to hear, Zuki, what do you want to come out of your experience from the lockdown particularly, and what has it rebooted in what you want to achieve moving forward?
Yeah, sure. What a time to reflect, right? This lockdown has kind of forced us all. We haven't lived in our homes for so long, and lockdown has forced us to live in our homes, so many different ways. And parts of me have really, really appreciated the lockdown, just from the getting off that hamster wheel of just doing things all the time for the sake of doing, and being forced into a moment of absolute silence and nothing. So as a deeply reflective person, I have appreciated the lockdown from that perspective. But I haven't been disconnected from the reality that what the lockdown has done for a lot of people is completely dismantle reality.
Exactly.
And security, that sense of security, it has completely broken that down. There are so many people that used to have job security that no longer have it. And a lot of people that have been thrust into a deep space of uncertainty and frenzy. And therefore, people that are dealing with that crisis of between survival and keeping a very healthy and balanced mental state. So a lot of people have missed the opportunity to just to show up and be deeply reflective because they're just trying to survive. What I hope comes from this for a lot of people is the realization that actually this is the opportunity to do the things you've always wanted to do. To think on a broader scope in terms of what is available to you. The one thing that is real about this new era is abundance, right? There's an abundance of resources. There's an abundance of people that are thinking in a similar way. There is an abundance of, I suppose, desire even from consumers to have new ways of doing things. So given that as a context, fear not the availability of things to do. Earlier, Wiebke talked about if you're thinking about entrepreneurship, go do it. This is the time to sell a muffin. This is the time to knit a jersey and sell it. This is the time to set up an e-commerce store. This is the time to side hustle. This is the time to be a consultant, a freelancer, an inventor, a job seeker, and be all of those things at once. Because you're designed that way. You're you're a dynamic person with multiple interests, and now the tools are available. Seek not just mentorship, seek also coaches, psychologists, seek people that have walked the road. Literally surround yourself with an army of people that first keep you mentally sane, and then people that can help you direct, and then people that can help you think and structure, and then people that you don't have to do it alone. I think that should be the golden rule. Plug in, collaborate. There are so many ways to do that. So what I hope is that people will not hang on to what used to be. That reality is gone. Spend time understanding what is possible and plug into things, places, people, and networks that can help you realize that, and do something. Do.
Right. And we'll talk about that later, about what have you done actually. And because similarly, what has been your biggest, pivots out of this time of uncertainty and a bit of anxiety, And also, if you have anything around, what are you thinking through mental health? And I know as a student, sometimes that, you can sort of find yourself in a hole and say, actually, I can't think about anything anymore. So what have you found for yourself in that aspect?
Sure. I'm so glad Zuki is on this call because, entrepreneurs always see they always see the opportunity and the hustle and the what can we do about it. And as academics, we sit there and we're like, oh my gosh, what does all of this mean? And is this good? Is this bad? Etc. So
you still have to build a model and a framework to understand this.
Exactly.
And a model.
Absolutely a model. Analyze the data, get all the data. Now there's so much data, and where do we even start? So on the one hand, being in academia, and especially being in a full-time PhD position, I've been hit lightly by the lockdown because I could put my nose into my books and I could write my research proposal, and nobody is affected by anything that I do right now. Which means that I'm putting, again, being an academic and putting out my disclaimer of where I'm sitting in this conversation. I think so I'll speak a little bit about what worries me, which again is bringing in the academic. What worries me is that COVID-19 has shown so many fractures in our global social system. And I think, to me, there's a real question of saying, how do we engage with those fractures, and how do we then go and rebuild the world that we want to live in? And so, if anything, if the world was unequal, COVID-19 is probably making it more unequal. If it was difficult to navigate the digital world of information, it's become even more difficult to navigate the digital world of information. If there were racial tensions, there definitely still racial tensions. So all of these things that have been in the world are effectively are being they're almost like spat in our face. And so the world, the one thing that I want the world to go back to again is to move away from single narratives. And I think we've moved into this, we've moved into stories where we've got A and B and nothing else, black and white and nothing else. Yeah. And I think as what South Africa can give to the world, and what we as South Africans, I think, really have, and have shown throughout our history, and what I want us to go back to, saying, we know how to engage with diverse perspectives. We appreciate that different people bring different things. We appreciate that we might want to, even though it's complicated, we might want to have 11 national languages rather than 1 or 2. And I really want us to have more of that, of saying there isn't just a right and a wrong. There are many different perspectives. And in the end, what's going to make our future rich is not having everybody doing online and nobody doing anything else. It's about people pursuing their diverse passions and doing the things that drive them. So if you're thinking about career choices, yes, of course, you need to be able, for example, to navigate online and digital world. But there's so much potential just doing basics. And again, it's think about how you, what do people want to eat? How do you give them what they want to eat? Who wants to eat? How do you give different people different things to eat? Where do people want to exercise? How do you make that possible? So don't be trapped into the thinking that you can only survive in the future if you can code and you kind of are a social media influencer or something like that. There's so much scope, especially in South Africa and in Africa, to really do basics and to do them really, really, really well.
Yeah.
It's also, you're speaking about the danger of a single story. I think there's a talk by Chimamanda Adichie, actually has a video around that. There's a danger in a single story. And I think what we often try to do is try to make things simplistic, when actually human beings are rather quite complex, and it's about perhaps navigating the complexities of what we are. And I think that's what I'm also interested in drawing out from you too, is this time has also been very complex in terms of career, in terms of personal life, family commitments. Life is still happening in its various forms. So I'm keen to know what do you want to come out of this, knowing more about yourself? What have you learned more about yourself, and what do you want to come out being very certain about yourself? And where's the first place you want to go coming out of this that's going to sort of revive that aspect of who you are?
Oh, Wiebke, go first.
Man, I realize that I'm a social being. I know that, but it's I really miss the little things. I miss hanging out with my peeps. I hate wearing a face mask. It suffocates me. I still do it, but it suffocates me. When the coffee shops, or when restaurants and coffee shops open, my greatest joy, I have to admit, was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, having a coffee, being in Cape Town, having the rain slash against the window, and then hearing the noon gun go off, and sitting there and being yeah, there's a life out there. And I think it's that moving out of your own head and out of your own home, and being hey, I'm part of a community, I'm part of a system, and I want to interact with that system and with that community. So I want to greet people, I want to smile at people, I want to shake hands, I want to hug. So I really, really miss that, that social being, and that realizing that it's not it's really not just me as a human being, it's me in the community and in the world that I live. And I want to touch that, I want to shape that world, I want to interact with it, I want to be with people. So lockdown has definitely reinforced that I'm not an individual living my own little life. I'm an individual in a community.
In an ecosystem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what has been also quite interesting to see is people always thought the introverts would love it. Oh, they're going to sit at home and just relish. And it's a lot of the introverts who are like, I want to be outside now. And really and regaining skills and competencies that they never had before, which has been very, very dynamic to witness. Zuki?
I think to extend on that thought, I feel like I need to do more. I don't know why I've got that feeling of I need to do more. And maybe it is the earlier discussion about what COVID has revealed, the fractures in our society, that kind of makes me feel like we just have to be more. We have to do more. So I've got that to deal with. As if I'm not doing enough, there's still the desire to do more. The other thing is, I think I want to challenge myself to plug into technology more. What I realized, having to do 100 days of Zoom calls, first I learned that you can actually strike a connection with people like this.
Right.
Instead of desiring that personal contact all the time, because what it does is limit your ability actually to reach more people. So I think I want to challenge myself to understand technology and make it my friend, and not think that AI is for data scientists only and people that can code, because that's a self-imposed yeah. So I mean, I think I'm not smart enough for AI, so I'm just gonna leave that to the experts. But in reality, what I'm now learning about AI is that it's actually human intuitive. It's a reflection of us. It's an extension of us. So I'm slowly moving myself into just understanding the basics of coding, of robotics, of AI. I have no desire to be an expert at it, but I understand now how it can actually enable me to do more. So that's what I want to do for myself. And of course, I'm availing myself through even my coaching practice to coach, mentor, direct people who feel fractured, who feel directionless. So I do that. I have the ability somehow to kind of see the eureka moment in a mess, in complexity, and be able to say, ta-da! So because I can do that and it just comes naturally, I gift that to people through my coaching practice, and I think people need that now more than ever. There's just a lot of everything going on. There's a lot of bad news, negativity, fear, uncertainty, and I think what I can do in my own small way is bring that eureka moment where you've got a level of clarity to be able to touch something that you can, start laying the crumbs that lead you to doing. So yeah.
That's a lot of fun, and I think that's also the fear is sort of crippling what success might look like. Which is I mean it makes sense, right? Because we don't know what to expect of our future. So I'd like you to share a little bit about what your ambition is then in this case. What's your ambition for Africa? What's your ambition for South Africa as well? Looking forward to the next few years when we come out of a very difficult economic, socio-economic, political time. What would your sort of two main ambitions be for the country and for young people in this country with career prospects, with who are looking out and finding that they're not finding what they want to do, and as entrepreneurs in your own right? What would that ambition? How would you articulate that ambition to be? Wiebke, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Sure, I think so. I wish it wasn't so for young people in South Africa, but the reality is you're gonna have to do it yourself, and that's as simple as it gets. So I would say, and if you're going to have to do it yourself, the question is like, what advice can I give you to help you figure out what that might mean?
Right.
And I think if there's one word that you're going to remember of this whole thing, remember the word value. So ultimately, the question you have to ask is, what value can I add to the world, and whom am I going to add that value to? And if you with passion and with drive and relentlessly pursue ways to figure out whom you can give value to, and if you create value in the world, then we will slowly start rebuilding South Africa. So I think sometimes it's like we think a lot about money, but we don't always think about where money comes from. And money ultimately is you doing things either with your hands or you doing things with your genius and creating them in the world. And so it's a process of creating things with your skills and with your mind that shapes the world and that creates value. And that process of value creation, that's where somebody else will eventually say, hey, I want that. Hey, I'm doing this. Can we trade? Can we swap? And if multiple people create value in different ways, that's where we start having an economy. That's where we start having business. That's where we start having trade. And like our realities, we'll have to build it from the grounds up. And I think of it sometimes like that, is like systems are built with a particular purpose for a particular reason. South Africa and any country that's been colonized has been built for the purpose of resource extraction. So what happens then when you inherit a country decades later is you're sitting with a country that is designed for a particular purpose, but we don't want to use it for that purpose because we don't want to extract all our resources and ship them out. So until we come up with a different reason for existence, until we come up and say, well, our purpose as a country is this, we either going to be serving the old purpose or we're going to be operating in a vacuum. So as young South Africans, it's our duty, if we want this country, if we want a future in this country where we really feel this, we can live our best life, it's our duty to repurpose South Africa. And we'll do it by creating value.
Love it. Thank you. That's great. You know, on the value thing, actually, it's amazing because that's exactly how I make decisions about which meetings I attend these days. I say, will I add value? And if not, I'm sending an email saying there's just no value creation. It's a very small example, but it's, you know, this thing of extraction that's not how we're adding value anymore. And that's a powerful point to be made.
Yeah.
Zuki, as an entrepreneur and also working with young people, I'm sure that's a continuous conversation for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Wiebke nails there is the system that we have inherited no longer serves us.
Yeah.
And now we have to build a new story, right? What becomes the dominant narrative? Right. And it's my cry that it's a missed opportunity from our country's leaders to develop a new story for the country, which means it now rests squarely on the shoulders of young people to develop that new story. What is that purpose thing? And I think in order for them to do it, they have to be connected. There is no reason why a Jabu sitting in Johannesburg, South Africa, should not be connected to somebody in Kenya, in Ghana, in order to co-create, to bring value. All of the enablers are in place for that. I hope that, you know, given that Africa is going to be home to the youngest demographic of ready-to-work people, that we don't waste that opportunity. My call to young people is not to seek permission anymore from the generations ahead of them, because honestly, what we have given them is a broken system. So they cannot seek permission from us to fix it. They have to say, we see you for where you are, what you have created. We thank you for the greatness that you have, that we inherit from you, and we reject the fractures and the broken stuff. So with the gifts that you have given us, we're going to create a new story. And I think young people have to be brave to seek ways of learning that are non-traditional. as well as traditional. I'm not saying throw out academia, all respect to what academia brings, but I also think there's a multitude of ways to approach the key fundamental questions and statements that Wiebke brings. There are communities, plugins, learning platforms that are non-traditional. And I think young people must bring all of those together to start answering those key questions so that they're not asking for permission, but are creating. And the dots will eventually connect. If more and more people do that and they plug into the new story, suddenly we will see the new direction and we will be led by that direction. We're all quite used to being herded in a direction. If it's a strong direction, we will follow.
Right. I like this. So there comes out the rebel again in Zuki.
Allow.
But that's important. I think it's also that a narrative, it changes what the narrative might be. The challenge, though, for me as we speak becomes access, right? So creating is one thing, but opportunity to access is narrow predominantly and is not open to all. So, I'm keen to hear ideas about how young people then talk about that access. And, for us who are privileged, privilege in various ways, privilege has its levels and its dimensions. That is not often a question that we think about, because I will have a network that I can tap into to get X, Y, and Z. But that is the key sort of tool for people to utilize to move forward. Wiebke?
Yeah, it's such a difficult conversational question. And it's difficult because it's hard not to push it onto government.
Right.
And so I think of access, I guess, on two levels. The one is if you've got physical infrastructure for access. And I mean, on that level, it's easy to go to something like internet, for example, cheaper mobile data and so on, and saying, okay, so I could argue that if everybody's got access to the internet that in a way that is affordable, they can now reach all these amazing online learning resources. They can get remote degrees from any university or non-university, etc. They can maybe even access mentorship. So there's work to be done on that level to say is how can we give people access through digital. And I mean, I would argue ideally we'd also want access through physical. So we want transport systems that are affordable. We want infrastructure, road infrastructure that allows you to visit your neighbors. We want electricity, we want water. So we can speak on access on that level, but I think it negates a very big thing, which is that online learning isn't natural or easy. And I think there's a foundational level of education that is required that teaches a child to think and engage with the world. And I think having a conversation around access without also having a conversation around basic education becomes really difficult because it puts a burden on a child to need to know how to navigate in a world without having learned what foundational tools are available. So I think if I could choose one area where South Africa should pool all its resources, I'd say basic education. It might mean that for the next 15 years, a lot of other things don't work, but if we can provide really strong foundational basic education, I think that's really where we need to start to make a commitment to our future.
Yeah. Zuki?
Yeah, I have to agree. 100% with that. As somebody in the learning space, the education space, I think that's where it is most lacking. It is frustrating that we remain a divided society. It is frustrating that we don't have a single country vision, right? Because we put money behind what we value the most.
Right.
And it would seem that we are kind of serious, not serious about, bringing up a generation of well-educated people.
Yeah.
Education may mean. If I were to cry to government right now that as you step off your seats, you should have retired 10 years ago, but here you are.
Shame.
But can you at least make sure that everybody is digitally equal?
Right.
From an access point of view. Just lay the pipes, for goodness sakes, and let everybody have access. And the second thing is, my goodness, create classrooms that are dignified, and enable anybody who's available to teach to teach. So if those are the two things that this government can get right, and any government on this continent, that would be my plea to them. And we will, as entrepreneurs, as agents of change, and everybody in regular citizens of a country, we will always anyway be doing what we do, because for us there's no other way, right? So yeah, that would be my piece. I'm optimistic about the future, but I'm also very frustrated by what we still value versus what we should be valuing, and therefore the investment reflects what we value, and that's sad. But Africa rise, and it will.
Right. And I mean, that frustration, I guess it tends to bubble in a continent like ours. I think Wiebke made the point earlier, and I think Zuki as well, that we have a very young population that's really hungry for what's more. So I'm keen to hear what other young people on this platform might be saying, but we are out of time, but I do want to squeeze in a last final question. It's one of my favorite questions that I like answers to, and that's, what lesson has taken you the longest to learn? It's a question that I like to, because I'm like, I want to learn that now.
Just one.
Just one. What lesson has taken you the longest to learn? And maybe at the end, if you can just tell us what you're reading. I always find that powerful, especially now. People should be reading. So what should we be reading, and what are you currently reading? So Wiebke, just to end off, what lesson has taken you the longest to learn? And what are you reading?
Oh man, that is such a deep question. I wish I would have learned it 10 years ago.
Jabu has been merciless with these deep questions today.
So I would say is that I've been plagued for the longest time of my life by what I'll call it a mindset of, it's not about me, but it is about me. So basically, I never wanted to put myself in the spotlight, because I felt like, but it's not about me, it's about everybody else, and I'm just a part of this, I'm just contributing. And what I then eventually realized, and after the last 2 years I've been trying to unlearn it, it's really hard to unlearn, is realize that by not making it about me, I was actually making it about me, because I created a void that people were waiting to be filled, and I wasn't stepping into that freaking void. So basically, I spent all this time digging a hole. Okay, digging a hole is maybe not the right analogy. I spent all this time building it, like doing sketches and diagrams for a house I wanted to build, etc. I organized the builders. I organized like the finishes, everything. And when it came to actually building, I was like, oh no, but I don't want that house. And so it's really been a freaking difficult learning process to realize that by trying to not make it about me, I've actually been making it about me, because again, I'm not taking my space to add value to society in the fullest way that I can. So yeah, I wish I would have learned that at 18. I would have made a whole lot of decisions differently. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that by playing small, you're serving anybody, you're not. Now I got so passionate about saying that. A book that I'm reading the most beautiful, very surprisingly, the most beautiful book that I've come across so far. I normally read really dry science books that take me about 5 years to finish. So that's kind of my standard. But I've started reading a book called A Sense of Style. And it's written by a guy, Steven Pinker, who's quite well known for all sorts of books on cognitive, on the mind, neural, etc. But this book is about writing, and it's about writing beautifully. And what I find fascinating, so it's not it's a book it's literally a book about writing. And I was lying in bed yesterday, and I couldn't put it down. I was like, oh wow, this is kind of like a dry topic, but it's written in such a beautiful way. And it's really inspiring me to pay more attention about how I express my thoughts and my ideas and how I share them with the world. So A Sense of Style by Steven Pinker, highly recommended.
Right.
Yeah, the hardest lesson that I'm still learning is feeling worthy. to show up, because the voice of self-doubt is a very loud one. I've managed to always push past it, to wrestle it and show up anyway. But I think, something about our history as South Africa, our history and present as a female human, and something about our history as, the skin that I wear. There's so much steeped in that it's very easy to battle with the question of worth, self-worth. And I have achieved everything I have achieved because I've been able to hush it. But I wish it's a demon that would just be slayed once and for all for everyone. So yeah, I'm still learning that, but I'm definitely better at it. And that's why I can show up at any table and speak with confidence, and know that what I think, create, and bring and vocalize is actually worthy to be at any table. I'm reading a book called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, by historian Yuval Noah Harari. And it's one of the books I can't put down. Like when I'm finished, I'm like, okay, now I realize how little I know. So I'm going to go back to chapter 1 and learn again. I keep going back to it. I find it so empowering, educational, and